All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Marshall W. Allworth Planetarium. My name is Jessica. I am the director and will be your host for the show this evening. You've also met Brayden and Lynn, two of our students. Um, so for tonight's show, since it's the first Wednesday of the month, we do our monthly Exploring the Night Sky, where we'll talk about what you can see up for the month of May. If you have any questions throughout the show, feel free to just ask. If you aren't comfortable asking them out in front of people, that's fine. You can come find me after the show as well. If you need to leave at any time during the show, you are welcome to do so. You'll just exit through this front door that you came in. Just, of course, be careful because it does get dark in here. I think that's it for now, so I'm going to head to the back and we'll get started. All right. Get these lights down. So we are currently sitting here with the sky right now. Well, not technically exactly the sky right now, but you know what I mean. This time in the evening, sun is getting low over in the west. It's quite wonderful. We're having, a little bit longer days here. I very much like that I can leave work and it's not dark already, since I sit in a dark room all day. It's very nice. But since we're going to be taking a look at what we can see up in the sky for this month, we're going to need to go a little bit later into the night. So I'm just going to advance time here until the sun has set low enough below the horizon that we are seeing no extra light from the sun and we're getting a nice dark night sky. Now, this is more of a view that you would have outside of the city. In the city, we have light pollution, which kind of drowns out some of the fainter things. So this is a little bit idealized, but in a good, clear, dark sky, you can see anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand stars, depending on how dark your skies are and how little light pollution you have. So we are pretty decently into spring. So we have a lot of our spring constellations that are visible. To find a lot of them, we're actually going to be using something that we're going to find first. If you look kind of high up in the north, you will see a shape that most people are familiar with. And that is, of course, the 7 stars that make up the Big Dipper. Now, the Big Dipper up there is not a constellation. It's an asterism, which means it's actually part of a larger constellation. And in this case, the Big Dipper is part of the Greek constellation of Ursa Major, or the Big Bear, where the handle of the dipper is the tail of the bear, the cup of the dipper is the body, or at least the back half of the body, and then we add in some extra stars to make the head and legs of the bear. And this time of year, our bear is kind of upside down right now. Now, of course, you may know that in addition to our Big Dipper and Big Bear, we also have a little version, a Little Dipper, and a Little Bear. To see that, we are going to use the Big Dipper to help us. If we take the front 2 stars in the cup of the dipper and we follow those 2 stars, they're going to point us to this bright star named Polaris. You might know it as the North Star. But we find it because it is the end of the handle of our Little Dipper. And our Little Dipper is also our little bear, where again, The handle of the Little Dipper is the tail of our bear, and then the cup of the Little Dipper is the entire body of the little bear. Now, these bears might look a little peculiar to you. Bears don't typically have long tails like this, but the Greeks do have an explanation. You see, both of these bears were put up into the night sky by Zeus to keep them safe, and to get them up there, he decided to pick them up by their stubby little bear tails and spin them around and fling them into the night sky. And that process of being spun and flung by their tail is what stretched them out. And so that's how we end up with these stretched out bear tails for our big and little bear here. Now, there's one more constellation in the north I want to show you because it's going to be a part of a later story that I want to tell. But if you look in between our big bear and little bear, you'll see that there are a couple of stars in between the two of them. That is the end of the tail of Draco the dragon. And you can see he kind of winds his way around the little bear before his head ends up over to the side there. And he's breathing fire all over someone else who we'll meet in just a little bit. That is our dear Draco the dragon. Now, as I mentioned, for this time of year in the spring, there are a lot of constellations that we can find with the help of the Big Dipper. I think spring is a wonderful time to start learning constellations and start getting comfortable doing some star hopping and navigating around the night sky, because so much of it can be found by just finding the Big Dipper first. But in order to start looking at these spring constellations, we're going to have to look at a different part of the sky. So instead of having you like turn around, I'm going to turn the sky for us, and we're going to start over in the south. So I'm going to turn the sky. And we're making our way over to the south. All right. So the first constellation, spring constellation we're going to look for is one you might know, Leo the lion. And if you ask people, you'll often hear the trick to finding Leo is to look for the backwards question mark. The problem is with the dark sky and hundreds of stars, you can make more than one backwards question mark. So let me tell you how to find the correct one. And as I already said, we're going to use the Big Dipper to help us. So the Big Dipper is now high overhead since we have rotated the sky. And we're going to take the full cup of the Big Dipper and part of the leg to make an arrow. And that arrow is going to point us to the correct backwards question mark, which I need to turn on. There we go. There is our backwards question mark and the start of Leo the lion. He actually stretches out over to the left as well. But the curved part of the backwards question mark is his kind of head and mane. This bright star, which is the dot of the question mark, is named Regulus. It's the heart of the lion. And then the rest of the stars kind of off to the left of the question mark make up the rest of the body of the lion. And so he's kind of lounging up in the night sky. Now, his story is tied into a couple of others, so I'm going to wait to tell that one. But we are going to find a friend that is sitting next to Leo. If we look westward, or for us right now, to the right, just to the right of Leo, we'll see two bright stars. Those two bright stars are Castor and Pollux. They're the Gemini twins. But what we want to look for is right in between here, in between Leo and our Gemini twin stars here. You can make out a faint little Y shape. There we go, a faint little Y shape here. That faint little constellation is actually Cancer the Crab. And he is a harder one to find because, again, it is a faint constellation, but he is also tied to the same story that Leo and Draco are tied to, which is why I wanted to bring him up so that you would know where he is when we talk about him a little bit later. But another thing I want to point out, and I'm going to turn off the art just to show you this real quick. Another thing I want to point out is right inside of the constellation, you might notice this little fuzzy patch. I'm going to circle it for you. Right in there, we have this little fuzzy patch. And if you're having trouble seeing it, it is pretty faint. So you can try looking out of your peripheral, out of your side eye. That is much better at low light seeing, and so you may pick it up a little bit better. But this little fuzzy patch is Messier 44 or M44, also known as the beehive cluster. Let me turn off the Castor and Pollux. There we go. That is our beehive cluster. And so through a telescope, it would look more like this. So a cluster is a group of stars. In this case, they are an open cluster, so it's kind of a smaller group of stars. And it kind of got the name of beehive because for some early astronomers looking at it through telescopes, because of the way light can kind of get bounced around as it moves through our atmosphere, that can make stars, that's what makes them twinkle. And so when you look at this group of stars through a telescope, you see that little kind of twinkling or shimmering. And so to some astronomers, it reminded them of like busy little bees flying around. And so that's where our beehive cluster name comes from. But that is a great object to look at through either a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, because you can see it with your naked eyes, which makes it easy to point your binoculars or telescope to. And then once you do have that view, you get to see that that little fuzzy patch is actually lots and lots of stars here. All right. I'm going to turn us a little bit more southeast now. To look at some more of our spring constellations. And I'll actually turn Cancer's artwork back on so we can see our little crab there. All right. So for our next couple constellations, we are heading back to the Big Dipper, using that once again to start off our star hopping. But this time, we are going to use the handle of the Big Dipper. Now, you may notice that the handle is curved or arced. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow that arc of the handle, and we are going to arc to Arcturus, this bright star here. So that's the saying from the Big Dipper. You follow the handle and you arc to Arcturus. Now, Arcturus is part of the constellation of Boötes. I'm going to put him up. I'm going to put this constellation up here. And this is one that I really like to kind of let you guess. What do you think Boötes is? Anyone brave enough to answer? Well, Lynn, if you were seeing this for the first time, what do you think? Looks like a kite to me. A kite is a very common one. Yeah, a lot of people say that Boötes looks like a kite, which is one I like. I personally think it looks like an ice cream cone. I also just love ice cream, so I'll take any excuse for that. Here's what Boötes really is. He's a man. Yeah. This is a really good example of constellations rarely look the way they quote unquote should. A lot of times, these constellations require a good bit of imagination. Um, and Boötes is a great example of that. I've kind of gotten to picture him. I don't know if anyone has seen the animated movie Into the Spider-Verse, but the way they depict kind of the villain Kingpin, he's very triangular, with a really, really wide shoulders and then a tiny, tiny little waist and legs. So now Boötes kind of just looks like Kingpin to me. I'm so glad you're laughing, Len, and you appreciate this. I think what I need to do is get a picture of Kingpin and add him up there. Maybe that'll be a summer project. I'll add Kingpin to our constellations up here. Um, okay, but back to the star Arcturus because it has another name. In fact, many of the stars and constellations that we've talked about here have different versions. What we're looking at here is really the Greek version of constellations and the Greek night sky. But cultures all over the world have their own sets of constellations and stories and things. And so one of my favorite involves what we know of as the star Arcturus. But to the Lumi Native Americans, it's known as Coyote's Eyeball. So, Coyote shows up in quite a few indigenous stories. Usually, he's a little mischievous. But in this particular story, Coyote had come across a group of pretty ladies and he was trying to impress them. Now, I don't know about you. If I were trying to impress some people, I can think of a few things that I might do. Coyote's decision was to pluck out his eyeballs and start juggling them. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Coyote was thinking. Um, and understandably, the ladies were not impressed. They were more horrified. So Coyote starts throwing his eyes higher and higher, trying to be more and more impressive. Until, unfortunately for Coyote, he threw one of his eyes a little bit too high, and it got stuck in the night sky. And that is the star Arcturus, or that we know of as Arcturus. Yeah, I love that story. I think it's really cute. Okay, next bit of star hopping, because we have a few more spring constellations to look at. The spring sky is pretty full, pretty busy. So we did one bit of star hopping where we started at the Big Dipper and we followed the arc of the handle so that we could arc to Arcturus. Now what we're going to do is we are going to, from Arcturus, go down and south a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to spike to the star Spica. So that's kind of our, why am I blanking on the word? Phrase? Memory tool? Mnemonic. Our trick. That is our saying for the spring sky. We start at the Big Dipper and we arc to Arcturus. And then once we're at Arcturus, we spike down to Spica. Now, Spica is part of the constellation of Virgo the Maiden. I kind of view Spica as like a hand on a hip. I believe this program draws her a little bit differently, but she is just kind of stretched out in the night sky. There is our maiden Virgo. Now, Virgo Her name is actually Persephone, and she is the goddess, daughter of the goddess Demeter. It's been a long day. Persephone is the daughter of the goddess Demeter. Demeter is kind of like the goddess of the harvest. So one of the things that she's able to do is kind of control the weather, so that you have, rain and sun and everything you need to um, grow crops. But Persephone was beautiful. And the god of the underworld, Hades, instantly fell in love with her as soon as he saw her and decided that she needed to be his queen. But instead of, talking to her, courting her, flirting with her, whatever you want to say, like a normal person would, he plants a flower in a field that Persephone will often visit. And this flower was beautiful, and so Persephone was drawn to it and went over to take a closer look. And as soon as she did, the ground opened up underneath her and she fell down to the underworld, where she was now trapped. Um, Once her mom, Demeter, learned about what happened, she was furious, storms down to the underworld, confronts Hades, tells him, "You have to give me my daughter back." Hades refuses, and this goes back and forth. While they're fighting, a lot of time has passed. Persephone starts to get hungry, and so she ends up eating pomegranates. And depending on the story, some say it was just one pomegranate seed, some say it was six, some don't have a number, but she ate a pomegranate. And this was important because eating in the underworld made that your home. You had to stay there. And so she was now rightly trapped. She could not leave the underworld, no matter what her mom tried to do. But Demeter wasn't having it, so she got Zeus involved, and Zeus ended up having them come to a compromise where Persephone would spend half of the year with her mom and the other half of the year in the underworld with Hades. So, for the 6 months of the year that we see her up in our night sky, that's when she's on Earth. She's living with her mom. Her mom is happy, and since she's happy, we get nice, happy weather. Really nice, sunshiny, warm, happy weather. Then, for the 6 months of the year that she is not in our night sky, she's under the horizon. That's when she's down in the underworld with Hades, and Demeter is upset and cold, and so we have cold, bad weather because of that. And that is how the Greeks explained the seasons and the seasonal changes in weather patterns. Um, I do like to add a little addendum that even though this didn't start out the best, Persephone and Hades did end up becoming madly in love and were this truly awesome power couple. And is one of the few Greek stories that actually has kind of a happy ending. So we're going to ignore the kidnapping that brought her down there and just focus on the fact that they ended up being a very in love, happy couple. All right. So we have two more constellations to look for and one more story to tell. For our next bit, we're going to head back up to our star Arcturus and to our kite ice cream cone boat-taste weird shaped man. Now, if you look just to the east, to the left of Boötes, you might see that there is this kind of U shape or backwards C shape of stars. And this is Corona Borealis, the northern crown. From here, we are going to look for Hercules. Now, this is another one that people will say, just like with Leo, they're like, oh, just look for the backwards question mark. For Hercules, they say, oh, just look for the keystone. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I still don't know what a keystone looks like. So that has never been a useful tip for me. So I'm going to share with you how I find him because I think my method is a lot better. It's a little weird, but essentially what we want to do is turn the crown into a spoon. And it makes a little bit more sense if we go back to thinking of Boetes as an ice cream cone, which might also be why I lean towards him being an ice cream cone. But yeah, we want to turn our crown into a spoon. And to do that, we are going to add in these two stars right next to it. And that's going to become the handle for our spoon so that we can eat our ice cream cone. We're just going to pretend we eat ice cream cones with spoons, okay? Just go with it. So the reason we did this, these two stars that we add in to become the handle of our spoon, that is the belt of Hercules. And so we have his body right here, and then arms and legs. He's flailing around a little bit. But you know, you would be too if you had the head of Draco the dragon right next to you, breathing fire at you. So, for our last story of the evening, we are going to finally bring Draco, Leo, and Cancer the Crab all together into one final big story, which is the story of Hercules. So, Hercules, you may know, is the son of Zeus. His mom's immortal, so he is a demigod, a half god. But because he is half god, he does still get some powers. And in the case of Hercules, his powers are super strength. Now, this has a lot of people scared of him, especially when growing up, he didn't always know his strength, so he tended to get into some trouble. But he's a good guy, and he wants to show this to people. And so he ends up talking to one of his friends who was a king, and his friend told him, hey, if you complete these 12 seemingly impossible tasks, you will prove that you're a good person and people will like you. So these are the 12 labors of Hercules. Now, 3 of them are currently up in the night sky. We'll start with Draco. Draco guards a special tree that grows golden apples. And so one of Hercules' tasks was to retrieve a golden apple from this tree. And so what we see in the night sky is actually Hercules battling Draco so that he can get to that tree and get that golden apple and complete that task. Now, Leo the lion is a part of another labor. When Leo was on Earth, he was known as the Nemea lion. And he was kind of magical. He had this special fur that couldn't be pierced. So you couldn't hurt him with, swords or arrows or daggers or anything like that. So for the, common person, he was basically untouchable. And Leo terrorized people because there was nothing they could do to stop him. So one of Hercules' tasks was to defeat the Nemea lion. And since he had super strength, he didn't need a sword. He used his strength, and he was able to defeat the lion. But the gods were sad about this, so they decided to put the lion up into the night sky to remember him by, and so that's why he is up there. Side note, after Hercules killed Leo, he ended up making a big coat out of his fur, and that kind of backfired on him because people became more terrified of him because he killed something that was, in their minds, unkillable. And that made him even more crazy powerful and scary than Leo was. So yeah, that particular task backfired a little bit. All right, and lastly, we have our little crab Cancer. Now, he is not a task himself. In this task, I almost said Leo, Hercules was fighting the Hydra, which is another monster. This one is also really difficult to defeat because if you cut off one head, 2 more grow back in its place. So while Hercules was battling the Hydra, the goddess Hera, who is Zeus's wife, decided to send Cancer the crab to try and distract Hercules so that he would fail because she didn't want him to succeed. She didn't like him. Unfortunately, that didn't work. In fact, Hercules didn't even really notice the crab was there and accidentally stepped on him and killed him. So Hera put the little crab up into the night sky as a thank you for your sacrifice in trying to help me. Now, there are 9 other labors, and many of them are told through constellations. They're just not up this time of year. But spring, since we have Hercules up, and 3 of the constellations that are a part of his labors, is the time that I really like telling his story because of that. So to end us off, I know I'm a little bit over, but I want to show you one last thing because it's my favorite object to look at through a telescope in the spring sky. If you look on the side of Hercules, where is it at? There it is. I had to find my button. Right on the side here, and let me turn his art off so you can see it a little bit better. You might notice a very, very faint fuzziness. It's a little bit harder to see with your eye, but this is M13, or the Great Globular Cluster in Hercules. And through a telescope, it looks more like this. A globular cluster is home to tens of thousands of stars packed in really close together. And so because of that, they're one of my favorite things to look at through a telescope. Even a pair of binoculars would work for this one. But because you have so many stars close together, it kind of shimmers. And it looks, I've heard like a puff of glitter in the eyepiece. I think it looks kind of like shimmering crystals or shimmering jewels, but it is beautiful. And like I said, one of my favorite things to look at through a telescope in the spring. So if you get a chance and you have yourself a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, find Hercules, use our ice cream cone and spoon to find Hercules. And then you'll see on his side there, his right side, you can find the globular cluster that is a part of him. All right, well, we are going to head ourselves through the rest of the night. As we get later into the night, we've got our summer constellations starting to come up, as summer is right around the corner. And then just before the sun comes up, really early morning, we're also starting to see some of our fall constellations. We also get several planets starting to come up in the early morning. Let me go a little bit further here. So we got Saturn, Mars, and Neptune. All of them right now are pretty close to the sun, coming up just before sunrise. But as we get later into the month, they're going to move further and further from the sun and be visible a little bit earlier in the morning. So if you like to stay up late, like I do, you have a few planets there in your early morning sky here. And then we have our sun coming up, bringing us back into the daytime. You did see kind of Mercury and Venus labeled there. They're not quite visible right now. They're too close to the sun to be seen. They will come back out in the evening in June, I believe. So Mercury and Venus, not visible right now. Neither is Jupiter or Saturn. They are also all too close to the sun right now to be seen, but they'll show back up in another month or two. But that brings us back to the day, to the end of our show. Thank you all so much for coming out. If you haven't picked one up already, out in front of the TV are some star charts. They will help you find the stars and constellations we talked about. They also have information on like where the planets are. We do have a minor meteor shower happening the night of May 5th. It's minor. You're looking at, 5 to 10 meteors an hour, but it still could be a fun one. It has information on that. And yeah, are there any questions? No? All right. Well, thank you again so much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'll be back here Thank you. I'll be back here if you do have any questions. Otherwise, have a safe trip home and a wonderful rest of your week.